Hey everyone, and welcome to the first tutorial of the Drunken Tyromancy show. So because I'm setting up all this stuff myself and learning as I go, of course I've run into all sorts of different questions, and I've looked at user guides and tutorials and all the rest of the stuff you do, and I've encountered that age-old, well, actually it's a more recent problem in the world where basically nobody wants to do proper documentation anymore. So in the good old days, people used to write tomes about things, and they would write every last detail. But now what happens is that things are changing so quickly, I guess, and the people at the top are greedier than they've ever been. So they just said, you know, what are we spending all this money on documentation for? You know, just let the customer figure it out. And they think, screw us. Which is a gigantic mistake, and it leads to worse and worse problems. And these people are typically so stupid that it's going to take them probably several more generations of their, next, upper class git of the year offspring to understand the nature of the problem, which they have now spiraled out of control for the last 3.5 centuries or whatever the hell is going to happen. Anyways, so this is my attempt to help you through my learning on the RODECaster Duo. And I'm also going to cover some things about OBS and about Microsoft Windows. So if you are one of these people who have a limited amount of space, a limited amount of hardware, you can't, for what you want to do, you can't purchase additional equipment, like you've kind of, run out of budget. Other people's tutorials aren't working for you because they're doing something different. Hopefully this is the tutorial for you, because my aim is to explain as best as I can the underlying mechanics of what at least appears to be going on here, and which my tests seem to confirm. Okay, so here we go. I'll just finish this little first bit of audio recording, and I'll tack this on the front of the rest of it where the details are to come, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much.
Alright, hey everyone. Okay, so what I want to try and do with this video is to give you a tutorial of sorts, which is not exclusively just on the RODECaster Duo or OBS or anything, or trying to present myself as any expert in it, because I'm certainly not. I mean, I'm learning this stuff, but what I found was that there are certain omissions from documentation. There is an issue of ambiguity in language. People who perhaps are writing documentation or making tutorials who are fine when what they're explaining is how they use it, and they're dealing with an audience who also does exactly the same thing, or something so close to the same thing that there's no need for variation. You just set the thing up that way and it works. And they kind of get away with looking like they know a lot more than they do, and they kind of excuse all the things they're not explaining, but in reality I think they probably don't know. And they're also not necessarily great teachers, because when you listen to their language, there's a lot of things they skip over, a lot of things that they don't explain, a lot of things that they use language in a very ambiguous way, and you're left wondering, hang on, what did they mean by it? Did they mean this or did they mean that? And they didn't even see the ambiguity in the first place to remove it from the explanation. They just left it there. Now that might work fine for some people if you have a nice little easy setup and you've got tons of money to kind of buy all the equipment you need, you've got tons of room to get everything set up the way you want. But for a lot of us, we're not dealing with that. What we're dealing with is a situation where we have a very, very limited space. We've got limited equipment. We've got equipment issues. We've got, it's like you're just trying to make it work for the space you've got. And one of the things that I found is that there may, in addition to issues with how things are explained, there may actually be hardware limitations on what these things can actually achieve, which in the marketing of it, they didn't want to mention, yeah, it won't do this, because, the companies are trying to sell stuff and make money, so they don't like talking about what it won't do. And so in their language, they never nailed it down to what it won't do. And so you're left there wasting hours and hours and hours trying to do something, which, by the sound of what they were saying, surely it should do. By the look of how it does other things, which are effectively the same thing happening on a different channel, it does it fine there. Why won't it do it here? So I'm going to try and explain all of this underlying mechanics, along with some issues of language that I've mentioned, of ambiguity of things, and clarifying that for you, but also talking about some design flaws and bugs with Windows. And I seriously mean these are massive design flaws and bugs, which I'll discuss, that have really kind of made things much harder for you. And if Microsoft keeps going in the direction that they're going, like from Windows 10 into Windows 11, then they're going to make it even worse. And from what I've seen, they already have. And I'm talking about the kind of things that even a first-year university computer science student should know you do not do, ever. It's like they've literally broken the most fundamental rules of design. And as such, they have an operating system now, which some of you weren't born back then, but I mean, I was mucking around with, Windows 95 and, Windows 3.1 and, the old DOS, Apple IIe before that, and, other friends had the ZX81 and all this kind of thing dating back into, like, it was either like the late 70s or the early 80s when we were, kind of kids into teenagers. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was like this was when the first of these computers came to our community. And so I've seen like a lot of changes along the way. And when Microsoft came along with Windows 3.1, I mean, it was a really, really limited thing. When they came up with Windows 95, it was, of course, a vast improvement and the hardware was getting better and so forth. But here's the point of it. There were bugs and design flaws with Windows 95, which still exist today. They have been inherited all the way through, from Windows 95 through Windows 98 to Windows Millennium Edition and Windows Metro, was it? Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 8.1, like all the stuff. They never fixed it, which means that either nobody at Microsoft understands that it is a design flaw, or it is that unless you're a big corporate client and you actually figure out that this is where your problem comes from and you say to Microsoft, we want this to be fixed, and you have enough sway with them for them to fix it, they're just not going to spend the money. They're not going to hire the guys to focus on this thing. Now, there was one interview that I heard. I don't remember if it was a recording or a video or an article written, but there was a guy being interviewed who was an ex-Microsoft guy, fairly high up in the technical areas. I don't know what his position was, but what he basically said was, he said that there is no code guru at Microsoft. Now, this was ages ago as well, but I'm sure it's still true today. The proof is in the pudding. What he meant to say was there is nobody at Microsoft who understands the whole operating system. Not a single person. They don't even have a team of people who collectively understand absolutely everything, and their whole job is to understand absolutely everything so that all the teams doing the actual development can call on this resource to solve any problem. Now, you would think if you were a multi-billion-dollar corporation relying on this operating system for all of your revenue, then you would expect that a design flaw is a problem, we have to fix it. A bug is a problem, we have to fix it. But I've watched as countless bugs and design flaws just get carried through and carried through. And what's actually happening now is that where I see Windows 7 was like where they perfected, a lot of things. It was like everything was working really well. Compared to everything beforehand, Windows 7 was brilliant, It's like it took the best things out of Windows XP and made it like, a little bit better. And they had it all working well. And then they kind of effectively intentionally sabotaged it. Because as you know, like with the last few updates they put in, like, before they kind of cut off support, all of a sudden there's all these problems that never occurred before that were mysteriously occurring, and you had to upgrade to Windows 10. And you also found simultaneously that if you bought new hardware, even though there might have been community groups of programmers out there who are getting Windows 7 to work on the new hardware, they and Intel and everybody wouldn't sell you like the drivers and stuff to be able to get Windows 7 installed. It would just refuse to install Windows 7 on that stuff. It literally forced you to go into Windows 10. And they're doing the same thing with Windows 11. And the problem with that is that although I do actually like some of the design improvements from Windows 7 into Windows 10, specifically, I like the fact that you can still resize the taskbar in such a way that it isn't just getting bigger or smaller, it's getting an extra row of those single-click application launch icons, right? In Windows 11, it doesn't do that. You have to kind of get in underneath the hood through regedit, like editing the registry settings or some other way, to force it to make the taskbar bigger or smaller. And that's not adding extra rows, it's just making it bigger or smaller. And the icons get bigger or smaller. You're not getting an extra row of icons. You can't do it anymore. They've taken this brilliant functionality out. And one of the great things about having multiple rows of taskbars there is, like, if you take your little cursor to the edge of the taskbar and you resize it, then, now you've got the extra row, so you can drag it up. You've got an extra row, you can drag it up again, get a third row if you wanted to. So you've got like all your regularly launched applications there, which you pin to the taskbar. And the taskbar can auto-hide as well, of course, to, keep the maximum screen real estate for what you're actually doing. by the taskbar being bigger in that way, it makes it kind of easier to select and deselect as well, you know, sort of when it's hiding and unhiding rather than just a small strip at the bottom of one single row. And it means that if you open any additional applications and stuff that now have additional icons sitting there on the taskbar, not pinned, but just temporarily there, then any overflow past the ones that you've pinned are just going to go down to the next row, right? So it makes it like really, really easy to work with what's open and the things that you use most frequently. Now in Windows 10, the great thing that I saw was this whole idea of like a full screen start menu, right? So you can choose between the kind of slightly stylized change of the all programs menu. So it's still like an all programs menu. You can still get in there and organize it into folders, which I used to do. So you'd have applications of a certain type in a parent folder. So instead of going to all programs and just seeing this gigantic alphabetical list, what I would see is I would see device drivers. I would see file tools, you know, like things like, you know, 7-zip or, you know, some other kind of, you know, archiving tool, or Windows Explorer could go in the thing about, you know, file tools and utilities. Or I think I called it actually disk file utilities. Yeah, so it's like, you know, Rufus, lots of different programs that I could keep in that folder. And so I actually had like a short list of folders. All of the applications were then organized in those folders. So if I went to all programs and very, very quickly, without going through multiple things and scrolling down everything, I could quickly find what I wanted because it was all categorized, and I could then just run that application or pin it to the full screen start menu, or pin it to the taskbar, or send it to desktop as a shortcut. You know, it was very easy to find things. So Windows 10 gave you that ability to turn the other part of the start menu, the tiles thing, into a full screen thing. So that's what I basically have with Windows 10, is I've got the full screen tiled start menu, I've got the all programs thing, and I can go in there but haven't as yet, because of other things I've been working on, gone in and reorganized it the way that I used to do with Windows 7, because it's essentially the same system, just stylishly different. And I do like some of the style changes as well, going from Windows 7 to Windows 10. But here's where they really screw up. The old control panel inherited legacy thing from Windows 7 and earlier. That was done properly. You're talking to underlying hardware via device drivers and applications that deal with them. You've got it all categorized there. You know, all these kind of system things. You go into the system settings in control panel and you've got really good kind of granular control and configuration of everything through the options given. Now you can, of course, if you're an even bigger techie, go into like PowerShell or the command line and do other stuff as well, of course, I'm sure. But for anybody else, you know, you can get like a lot of that kind of full technical usage out of control panel. The new settings thing is effectively another way of doing all the same stuff, but it doesn't, in my mind, even qualify as a beta version of itself. It's just not there yet. It has all sorts of flaws and bugs in the way that it operates, and most notably, it can contradict what you see in control panel. Any first-year university student in computer science should be able to tell you that, especially from a company like Microsoft, should be impossible. You should not have two systems looking at the same thing in different ways and able to contradict each other, effectively able to fight each other in a sense, or just one disabling the other, or whatever the hell's going on, and you don't even know because it doesn't tell you, right? Now, in settings for sound, I've seen devices like appear and disappear, and the names aren't helping me to narrow down, well, but which actual device is this? Especially where you get two identical copies of the exact same device side by side with the exact same name, and there is no way to tell, are they both the same thing or are they different aspects of the same thing? You've got no idea, and there is nothing there to tell you. So you literally don't know what you're doing. And there's lots of other problems with it, but and I'll show you this when I actually get into demonstrating everything. But the point being is that this whole thing with Windows 10, with the settings thing, is absolutely flawed. Don't use it. It's like, just go to the old control panel. It might look more complicated on the surface, but it's far better because you are getting a definitive answer about exactly what you're doing. And if you just leave in settings sound mixer, everything just set to default, and just don't touch it, and just go to control panel sound, you will get what you need, okay? You will not necessarily get what you need, even if you are doing what it would seem is the correct thing to do through settings sound mixer, right? And you also won't even find settings sound mixer in a kind of very intuitive way. There's no tabs in it, so if you need two pages from settings open at the same time because you need to be able to kind of go back and change things or change between them, it's like you can't do that. You can't have tabs, you can't have multiple copies open at the same time. You have to kind of like look around and hunt for things, and then you've got to go back to the other one, and then back to the other one. It is idiotic in the extreme. Anyways, I'm going to pick up this camera. I'm going to switch to the headset XLR mic. I'm going to mute this USB mic and unmute that one. And then I'm going to show you with this camera things physically, and then I'm going to put the camera back here and switch over to screen sharing so that I can actually show you what's going on, all right? So excuse me for 1 second while I do the muty changes. And all right, excuse me there. So, all right. So what I've actually got here, and you can see, so this is like my entire life in the corner of my room, and I'm going to have to just be careful here because I'm dragging cable. And I really just crammed in the corner here. But the point is, so I've got a little seat here where I can sit and, you know, talk with a bookshelf behind me so that I look more intelligent than I am. And I've got a USB. This is the RODECaster V2, which has a longer USB cable going down the back to the laptop, which is running OBS and running Rode Central. The RODECaster Duo currently, so the USB mic, if I unmute channel 1, you'll see the levels going up and down because that's where it's coming in on. But in terms of where it's going out to be recorded, it's going out via the chat channel. Okay, now there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in a bit, but I've just muted both of these for the moment so that there won't be any feedback. I've got music coming from VLC. Just make sure I'm still showing that. Yep, so music comes from VLC on the laptop down the secondary channel where the fader slider here is just bring it down to like a lower volume so it can just be in the background. And the virtual channel of the, I hope you can see that, the virtual channel of the sound effects just joins the music on the secondary channel on the way back out again. And what I'm going to discuss with you is a little bit about inputs and outputs and the fact that an input or output here has exactly the opposite name over there on my laptop, right? So an input here is an output from the laptop. And an output here is an input to the laptop. And then, because of Windows, of course, they changed the name again by calling them microphones and speakers or headphones. And the other thing too, of course, is that here, although they are both an input and an output, it's like, so you've got two USB cables carrying 3 channels, plus any virtual channels that are kind of piggybacking off the ones that actually go down the USB cables. And you're not going to see in here really like the kind of the names of things that you're going to see on the computer. It's just channel 1 and channel 2 that have 3 channels on them. Other things can piggyback there. But so you're not going to kind of see it as an input and output. You've just kind of got to imagine it. But anyway, look, I'll get into that in a bit, and we'll deal with that through Rode Central. So that way we can do everything on the laptop, and I can show you on the screen where it's easier to see it. Now, you can see I've got a very organized setup here with lots of nicely tidy cables. It's not at all messy. But so those 2 USB-C cables, and one of them is coming up to a hub device and then coming down to the laptop, and the other one's just coming straight into the laptop. So either way, both USB-C connections are coming to the laptop. And I will now just, what I'll do is, and so the USB microphone as well is just plugged in the other side here, so that's the USB mic that I was on before. And this other laptop here is set up so that I can do like a Discord call from a different account and test the settings to make sure that I'm not going to deafen anybody or anything like that. And they both share the screen up the back here, and they both share the keyboard and mouse there, so I can switch between which thing is getting the extra screen and which thing's getting that keyboard and mouse. All right, but I just wanted to here as well because I will switch off this camera soon and onto that. So I'm just going to go here and unhide the that and switch it across so you will cease seeing this camera and start seeing that. There we go. I'll just put this camera back now that we no longer need it. And right, okie dokie. So Rode has some documentation on their website. But because of the way that they've laid it out, again, it becomes very difficult to cross-reference things. It's like, it's kind of fine as a marketing document, but I wouldn't have personally put user documentation in that form. As a marketing document, that's fine. It kind of shows people what to do if they're really curious about kind of getting into it before buying it and having like a rough idea. But as far as being a full technical document, user guide, I don't think it qualifies. It's not easy to flip between things and back again and to, get what you want. They really should have gone into, developing proper documentation, because a product like this is worthy of that documentation effort, and I don't think that they made the effort. And I don't think many IT companies make the effort anymore. Like, they really don't, and that's a shame because they need to. But anyways, so what I want to be able to do personally, because I've got limited space, because I can't get this laptop to be right next to the RODECaster, it's just not going to work. I can't move furniture around. You know, there's limitations in terms of, you know, I'm trying to do many, many things in a desperate attempt to, you know, put together an income and to develop my own ideas and projects. And I've kind of spent all of my budget. So from here, I'm just trying to get into making things work and hopefully earning money. And so, yeah, like I kind of can't justify spending any more money. So if you're in any kind of similar situation where you've got the equipment, it's all the equipment you're ever going to have, you're trying to make it work as best it possibly can, then hopefully I can help you here. So one of the first things to understand is the issue of routing. So the output routing. Actually, I'll just bring up Rode Central here as well, right? Because it's appropriate time here, and I will send that across there. Yep, okay. So as far as this, you know, can you see my mouse there when it's up there? That's really kind of strange. Like, it's supposed to be capturing my mouse, but it's not. But yeah, you see that. So my headphones are listening to the microphone from the same headset. And although they are muted, it's listening to the main channel, channel 1. It's listening to channel 1 chat, both of which are muted at the moment on the RODECaster, just to kind of stop any possibility of any kind of feedback, reverb, whatever. And my headphones are also listening to effectively what is the music and sound effects. Now, I've set the other headset, which I haven't got anything even plugged into, but I just set everything to 0. I do the same thing with the output. There's nothing plugged in, and I set everything to 0. I just like doing that on the off chance that you could ever get any kind of cross interference or something happening that you didn't realize is just going to interfere. If you zero things like this that you're not using anyway, then it doesn't affect your outcome, excepting that it removes all possibility of any unpredictable effects when you're really trying to do problem solving and troubleshooting and narrow down things to definitely what the root cause is. Because once I've done this, I know that it wouldn't matter. This has no possible way of affecting what I'm doing, and I can rule it out completely and never look at it. So that's why I do it, is just to be absolutely, completely anal about it and make sure that I haven't missed a thing. So far as what's going on down here, now this is where it comes into the limitations of channels, is that I've done the opposite of a mix minus, right? So normally like the main mix would be everything, right? The mix minus would be everything minus itself, and I've set a custom where it's an inverse mix minus. I'm doing itself minus everything else. And so the reason for that is that I have the music from VLC coming down the secondary channel to the Rode, the sound effects joining it, and then both of them going back to the laptop to be recorded, right? I have the chat channel taking my headset mic, taking the USB mic, and delivering them to anybody that I'm on a call with. And if I'm not on a call, then this is just delivering my headset mic or just the USB mic. So I can use both mics and just mute the other one so that I don't get reverb and feedback and that kind of thing. What I wanted to happen, which is a different situation again, but doesn't work because of what I suspect are these hardware limitations, is I wanted for my USB mic from the laptop coming down the main channel for the main channel to the so channel 1 main, for that to just listen to that microphone and send that microphone to its output. So it'd be like saying the USB mic comes from the USB mic through the laptop, down the main channel to the Rode, where it can be muted, where it can be affected by fader sliders, where it can be affected by sound effects. So you could, use that one on the thing that turns your voice into a robot voice or whatever, right? So you can do all that stuff to it and then send it back up. If I now hide Rode Central again, and then send it back up to be recorded here, right, in this top one. But for some reason it doesn't do that. And I suspect it is this. So there are points during tutorials and in the documentation and elsewhere where Rode and others mention that the chat channel is specialized for microphones. And that's pretty much all they say. Like, it's a very, very vague, potentially ambiguous, just, it doesn't say much, does it? Like, what does that mean? Does it mean that you can, get some kind of extra functionality out of the chat channel with respect to microphones? We don't know. Like, they never specify what it means. They just kind of vaguely say that in some way this channel is specialized for microphones and that this is where you add them. What would have been a better statement, and what I think is the truth from the tests that I've run, is that microphones won't work on the main channel in terms of outputting from the Rode to your laptop to be recorded, right? And the reason I say that is because I haven't been able to find any way in which it does work and in which Now, if I did find a way in which it almost worked, it was like there was never any way where it both simultaneously worked and had no feedback, no reverb, no nothing. Now, it might just be that it never worked, and certainly recently in my most recent tests, I haven't been able to find a configuration where this main channel gives me what you would expect to see from the USB mic going down to the Rode and coming back out on this channel. Now, just to demonstrate that again by bringing up Rode Central once more. Okay, so actually I will just switch it across though as well so you get this full screen. All right. So here you can see at the moment, the main channel, which is the channel that this microphone comes down to the Rode, is including it with its output, right? Now, currently though, it's muted. So of course we wouldn't expect to see any output. Yeah, I've just got to keep on switching. It worked differently last time I did this. Okay. Anyway, so we wouldn't expect to see any output here because it's muted, but I'll just show you something, okay? It doesn't change. If I just switch over mutes, here is my other microphone. I'm just going to take off my headset because I get echo, which is not what I want. So here's my main microphone, and you can see the levels going up there. It's coming out on the chat, which is fine. Now, mind you, it's also weird because currently on the Rode, the chat channel is actually muted. And yet, the chat channel that OBS is listening to is nonetheless picking up this mic. So there's like a lot of explanation they're missing here. But at least the thing is that I can affect this mic with sound effects with the fader. So if I do this, you should hear the volume go down. There we go. All right, and bring it back up again. So I can use the fader to affect that mic. And that's all good. That's like, you know, what I wanted. I just wanted it on the main channel. But I suspect that what they didn't definitively nail down in absolutely, you know, certain terms was that it simply just won't work on the main channel. You have to put it on the chat channel. And as to why, it's like, it can come down to the Rode on the main channel. It can appear here. I mean, I'm literally watching the levels on the Rode for the main channel go up and down from this USB mic. So as far as the Rode is concerned, it's hearing it. And as you saw in Rode Central, I told it to push it back out again. And meanwhile, the chat channel that this was also added to isn't pushing it out because it's muted or shouldn't be. And nonetheless, there it is coming in on the chat channel. So a lot of things just don't make sense. And they haven't explained it in unambiguous enough terms to know what the hell is going on. Now, if I unmute the chat channel, then it's not really going to make a huge difference there, right? Like there's no levels appearing on the Rode in the chat channel, but that is nonetheless the channel that it appears to be coming back up. So that's kind of just, you know, weird all around. And honestly, I haven't been able to figure out exactly what's going on. All I know is that it works. Anyway, I'll go back to the headset. Okay, so, and I'll try to speed up a little bit this time because I've done like a bunch of takes of this and I kind of like lost track of what I was trying to explain on a few occasions. So I'm doing yet another take to try and just get it right so that it's not too long a video and you hear everything you want to hear. Okay, so what I've actually got set up here in OBS is that, as you can see, my XLR headset mic is being recorded here on a mic to the chat channel. Now, from Windows perspective, what is an output from the Rode is an input to Windows and called a microphone in the old control panel sound settings. You don't want to go into the new Windows 10 settings thing because that is just a mess. It's just a nightmare. So I can record my microphone here. My USB mic will come out on the same one. I'm not bothering to record here. It's what I wanted to do, but it seems to be a hardware limitation, so I just mute that one. I mean, I could hide it as well, but I'm just muting it. I got these things in the order I want them here and with the names that I want them to have so that they kind of make sense and they're in a logical order by using a combination of renaming, hiding, unhiding, and going into properties and change which thing they're looking at. So it's not as easy as just dragging and dropping them into the order you want. You kind of have to muck around a little bit. And it was also after a reboot of things that it finally kind of appeared in the order that I wanted. So if you muck around with those things, just hide, rename, properties, and down here, unhide all. And if necessary, also try a reboot to just kind of get the software to, and the Rode to kind of, you know, re-talk to each other about which things are where. And you can eventually get it into a sensible order, and that's what I've done here. So I got like this kind of like standardization of names where you can see mic 1 main, and in brackets RODECaster Duo main mic, mic 2 chat RODECaster Duo chat mic, mic 3 sec RODECaster Duo secondary mic, out 1 main RODECaster Duo main speakers, out 2 chat RODECaster Duo chat speakers. So there's no uncertainty about what's there. It's very quick, very easy to see what's what, and to mute and unmute things that I'm going to record from. And the only things that I'm actually going to use here is that the mic 3 secondary, right? So what this is that VLC and possibly other things as well might play sounds from the laptop down to the Rode on that on the speaker channel. And then after having been affected by the fader sliders or muting or having special effects added to that channel as well, then all those things come back up and they appear here. So what you'll now see, if I just quickly go up here and play a brief bit of music, you should see, right, you see those levels there. So it's playing Rhiannon in the background by Fleetwood Mac. So I'll just pause that again. So that is just, sort of keeping my music and sound effects on one channel where I can get the volume levels right here for recording. It's combined with the volume levels that I'm setting on the faders on the Rode. So with respect to the volume of people's voices, I can get that recording to have the right balance between the two. There's no feedback. What I did actually want was to actually have any guest that I might interview on the chat channel to be able to hear the music and the sound effects. And I can do that still, but it does seem to just take the risk of adding some problems. But if I do want to do that, if I just sort of go and add in Rode Central again, and I'll just tab that across, that would simply be a matter of sort of saying, well, like here on the chat channel, if I add that and add that, then my guest's hopefully going to hear those sound effects and music. And I could change these, with respect to. So when you see the little blue thing there, that just basically means that the base level of volume, this is going to be a little bit higher. Now, I don't want to do that, though, because I don't want to deafen them. But the point is, it's like I could add that to it, but I've just taken them out because I kind of figured, well, as much as it might be nice in the future, if I really kind of get this running a lot smoother, for now I just want to remove as much complexity as possible. It might not give me everything that I want, but because of the limitations in the system and the issues that you encounter, it just kind of means that when you're first setting up and you want to kind of start getting a bit of a run, getting a bit of momentum up, you want to get those recordings done so that you can generate some content, and I can start adding things in later once I'm a lot more sure of exactly what's happening, and maybe when I can improve the equipment that I can afford to put into this, maybe if I can afford at some point to be in a bigger home rather than stuck in one bedroom. It's like when you're renting, it's life's not easy. I'm sure many of you know this. Anyways, so as far as Rode Central is concerned, right? So the secondary channel is receiving music and it's having the special effects added locally, and then it's putting both back up here to be recorded in OBS. The chat channel is doing something similar with mics, and I'm switching over which of the two is muted to avoid getting echo and reverb and stuff like that. So typically speaking, I'm beginning my podcast by talking on the XLR headset mic. I then switch over to the USB mic, and then if at some point I might organise to do an interview with somebody over Zoom or Discord or Signal or whatever, then I can be doing that back on the headset again, and they can hear me and I can hear them, and the audio quality is good in all directions. And I'm not deafening anybody, and that's also partly because, I'm not sure if I can show you this here or not, no, actually I haven't got it open anymore, but what I did is I went into Discord and set up a call between the two laptops, and what I basically did was the USB headset and microphone, which is connected to the other laptop with a different Discord account so that I can make a call to myself and test the system, I put the volume on that headset for that other microphone from the other laptop, I put it up full, right? It's like, if they have their volume up full, am I going to deafen them, right? That's the question I want to ask, right? Because if you're not going to deafen them, that's where you want it. And so you get up to a volume which is, when their volume is up full, it's loud, but it's not going to punch a hole in the head. And so that way, they've got a volume which is not uncomfortable, and they, or not too uncomfortable, and they can turn it down from there and just get it just right for themselves. Because you never know what other things they've got, and you want to try to test it at their maximum so that no matter, they might have accidentally left it on full, and you just don't want to deafen somebody. So that's like one of the first things you want to do. And you want to do that with the levels that you're expecting to have. So that's why I've got them up here to these kind of 2/3 or 3/4 mark on the sliders, so that I can go up a little bit further if I need to. Not much, but like there's a little bit of spare room at the top. I probably won't need to use it, but I can come down a long way, and I can mute and unmute, of course. So where was I? So music and sound effects, chat. I could add the music and sound effects into the chat to allow my guests to hear it as well, but I've just decided not to for the moment. I was hoping that this would allow me to keep my USB microphone completely separate, but it doesn't. And so I think that this is this thing where Rode should have said, this will only do such and such. It is a limitation system. You have to put your microphones on the chat channel. You can't do it elsewhere. Now, maybe you can put them on the secondary channel as well. Maybe because both of these two here are going down the same cable, that's why they've split it off. But they never explicitly state it, so we don't know. Like, they haven't clarified this. And if that's an entire cable unto itself, that would explain why we might be able to do with microphones on that channel what we can't do on this one. But I don't want my microphones joining that, so I haven't bothered testing it, and I'm not going to bother testing it. But if you are curious how you can carry my experiments further, try putting your microphones on there and see if it kind of works in the way that I was trying to do with there, because the idea was that, coming back again to OBS, is that I wanted up here to be able to get the microphone on its own channel after being affected by the Rode, right? So where I can add sound effects, I can mute and unmute and change its level with a slider. So far as down here, so this here is actually picking up that USB mic before it goes to the Rode, right? Because this is the out of the same. So this is main coming back from the Rode, this is main going to the Rode. And this is like another way to just help you kind of see what it is that's going on, so you can understand the difference between the directions and how, you know, what's actually going on where and when and why. Down here, the out chat, this is the one that's actually going to pick up that other pair of headphones and the microphone on the other laptop, or, you know, if I've got a real caller coming in on Skype or Zoom or whatever, I'm going to get them again before it goes to the Rode. Now, I don't want that to be the case. I actually want to get them after the Rode, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just because of the combination of things that I'm dealing with here, and you might find the same thing, is that you just kind of can't get the configuration that you actually want, right? And you might have to make some sacrifices to make it work. So this is one of the sacrifices I've made, is that I don't get my guest's voice coming to be recorded after the Rode. I get it beforehand. So anybody speaking on that other headset is going to appear here in the output chat. Now, it is still heading to the Rode, and the Rode can see it. Like when I'm on that other headset, I see the levels go up and down on the Rode, but for whatever reason, I just can't get it to recombine to come back up here and be recorded after that without also getting issues of reverb and echo and feedback and everything else. Now, maybe there's a combination where it works, but it'd be so much screwing around, and I would have to get up and out of my chair and come back over to laptop to do it, because I can't do it all from the Rode, and that's the only thing that I've got within arm's reach while I'm recording. So unless I want to do things with a lot more editing where I'm recording them in sections and then stitching them together and, you know, all the other kind of messing around, you know, I just want to get things done in one take if I can. You know, it's preferable. I mean, I don't mind doing a little bit of editing. I just don't want to do a huge amount of editing just yet, because there's too many other things to learn, too many other things to get right. So if you're in a similar situation, again, I just say make a sacrifice. Take some things that kind of, you know, they're originating outside the Rode. Like, they're not coming from the Rode originally. They have to go to it anyway, and just grab them before it gets there if you can deal with that sacrifice, to just kind of free up, you know, the channel flow on the USB cables for the things that you definitely want to come back from there after being affected by the Rode, and without any reverb or echo or feedback, no matter the configuration you're using for different purposes, whether you're talking on a headset on your own, or talking on a USB mic on your own, or talking on a headset to somebody else on a call, or talking, you know, via Bluetooth to somebody on a call, and maybe simultaneously to talking to a group of people on a call, and they can hear the Bluetooth thing as well. And maybe you might even have part of your setup that I don't have, in terms of where, again, if we go back to Rode Central, you might also have these output speakers set up. Now, I don't have anything connected to them. There's nothing there. You might have a second person here. And so, again, you're trying to remove reverb and echo and feedback for all of these places where you're listening, and for OBS where you're recording, or in whatever other software. And so if you have these additional complications, and you have the same kind of like limitations that are preventing any other solution, then it just looks like the solution is that you just have to deal with the fact that you're not going to be able to get everything after the Rode. Like, that's really the conclusion that I drew here, because it just, like, I kind of nearly got it there a few times, but I never got it there where I was really happy with the audio. There was always like a lot of reverb coming through. It just, and I did actually even go into, you know, I'm not going to bother bringing it up, but you know how you can go into those settings on the Rode where you can look at the presets, where there's like a broadcast preset and another preset, or you can go into the advanced configuration and you can look at sort of, you know, gain and the you know, fade and the decibel levels of when some effect, like an equalizer or something else, you know, condenser or whatever, is affecting something. Through that, I was able to just slightly reduce the reverb that I was hearing. but it was really kind of experimentation, and I still wasn't getting it quite as good as I wanted to, and I still wasn't sure if it was ever going to prevent, you know, the kind of really big audio problems where it's like, damn, you just screwed up an entire recording, and so I just kind of gave up in the end. I'm not an audio engineer, so I don't know the limitations of what is possible there. All I can say is that I couldn't kind of quickly figure out how to get it perfect enough to make it worthwhile doing, and it was not as good as what I'm listening to now. All right, so what I'm listening to now is being done without that, and it's working fine and working better than that did. So it just seems like the sacrifice that I made with how it's going to record here gives a better result than trying to tweak it on the thing. Now, maybe an expert might be able to do better. I don't know. But anyway, what we do know is that, excuse me, my other laptop just fell asleep for a second there. Okay, so what we do know is that we can't get this main multi-track output from the Rode to record for this configuration. So my headset XLR mic has to be recorded here. My USB mic will be recorded here. I'll use the mute buttons on the Rode to switch between them so that I don't get echo, reverb, whatever. I'll have the music being recorded here after the Rode. I will ignore the channel going down to the Rode, which is basically the USB mic before the Rode. So that's being muted. So you can say you can hear it, but nothing's going into OBS, into the recording. And then down here, this last one, if I set myself up for a call with somebody, then I'll just unmute this down the bottom to bring that channel on. And I'll set up Discord and stuff, and I'll do a call, and then their voice will appear down here. And that way I'll get everything through to my recording. And of course, remember that here's an area that I don't really kind of know enough about, because again, it's like, you know, trying to find decent documentation these days is damn near impossible. I just kind of started all these things with like a -2 decibels on them, just to bring them down just a tad. This one that I found, which is basically where this microphone right now is coming through. This microphone is very, very good, it seems, and it's able to grab like a lot of volume. And rather than pulling the slider down on the Rode, I figured what I would do is actually pull it down here, and in that way now I've got the right level for the recording. I know that also what my guest on a call is going to hear is correct, because I went into the mic volume within Discord, and I'll do the same for any other application that I use. I'll go in there and I will bring the level of that microphone down significantly. I brought it down to 40% in Discord. So that's all it's recording from this mic, but that's the perfect volume to go through to my guest, which means that even if their volume is up full, they will not deafen themselves, right? And I won't deafen them. And then they can just kind of pull it down from full, just a few notches kind of thing, to wherever it's most comfortable, but they won't have had to do that after an extremely painful experience of having, you know, somebody yell in their ears, and feedback and everything else. So that's what that out chat is like. That's their voice. You know, I've got everything else here. So other things to quickly show you, because again, like I'm kind of like losing track of what I did and didn't show you, but I'll just quickly reiterate about the Rode. So remember, the Rode has 2 USB cables. One of them carries 2 channels. It's channel 1 main and channel 1 chat. It appears that channel 1 chat is not just specialized to microphones. It is the place where you have to put them, and you just don't get a choice in that. It's like, maybe they didn't want to use that language because they thought it sounded bad from a marketing perspective, but screw marketing. We want to know the truth. We're trying to use your product, for God's sakes. Put the detailed explanation there somewhere. Make it easy to find. Instead, they gave us a marketing document and called it a user guide, which is just an idiotic decision. I'm sorry, Rode, but that's just a dumb decision. Whoever told you to do that, they're an idiot. Fire them. Be like Dr. House. You're fired. Leave. Anyway. So there's 3 channels going down, 2 cables. You can piggyback the virtual channels from the Rode, like the sound effects, any other kind of, virtual channel there. You can piggyback it onto something else, and that way it does come up here to get recorded or to go through to wherever else you want it to go through to. And as far as the Rode is concerned, from that perspective, although you do have input and output, you're not actually viewing them there, clearly as dealing with inputs and outputs. All you just see is the icon for channel 1, the icon for channel 1 chat, the icon for channel 2. And, what you're dealing with is kind of like you're dealing with both input and output simultaneously in a way. And from there actually comes some of the confusion, because really what they should have, and I'll just quickly do this one as well, right? If you go back to Rode Central, what would be really, really handy on this interface would be, so maybe you can, actually I'm not sure if that's really capturing my cursor, it doesn't seem to be, but you can see the result of my, there we go, hang on, now you can see it. What would be really nice is if you had tooltips when you hover over something, and you had in the settings the ability to turn on or off the tooltips. So, like if you know what everything is now and you don't need the tooltips, fine, switch them off. Now, either just in a discrete top corner or something, having like a little circle with a little italics I to indicate information. Or another good technique, if you don't want to use any real estate space here for a little extra button that somebody could accidentally press when they didn't mean to, what you could also do, I haven't seen a lot of software companies do this for a long time, but what they used to do was have like a little question mark icon, and you'd click the question mark icon, which would change your cursor into a cursor with a question mark, and then you click the thing, and that tells it this is not a regular click, this is a help click. And so what I want you to do is give me the help information on this item. The third way that you can go about it is the right click. So you right click on something and you get a context menu, and that could lead you to help. But they really need to do something here, because it's like there's so much stuff that you could possibly want to know about these things. And if you're not going to produce a proper documentation, and if there's so many ambiguities in the way that people explain things and so much stuff that's just not explained, I mean, it's fine if you're an audio engineer, but for everybody else, like you're looking at this thing just going, what the hell's going on? Put a right-click menu there and give people a help thing, which will bring up a browser page or whatever with exactly everything that you could possibly ever want to know about that thing, and linked to the document about anything that's mentioned on that page, But everything you could ever want to know about this object should be on that page. No questions should be unanswered on that page about this object. None. That's good documentation. It doesn't exist. So we need some kind of metaphor used by the designers and coders to give you like a lot more feedback here, so that you can learn within the application what's going on, especially in the absence of any kind of serious printed documentation. And I don't know about you, but when I got the box of this RODECaster Duo, there was no printed documentation in the box. There was no disk with printed documentation in a digital form on the disk. There was no USB key with that either. The only thing there was printed on the inside of the box was a QR code. And if you scan that QR code, it takes you to a web page where down the bottom there's an unexplained link for that, what was it called, like the ASIO driver or whatever, which they don't tell you definitively, you have to install this. They don't tell you this is what this driver's for. It's just there, driver, bang, thing. Well, what is it? They tell you nothing. The other thing next to that is what is labeled as a quick start guide. It's not a quick start guide. It's a handful of pages long in a bunch of different languages, so only a very, very short section of it is in English, and that part is not a quick start guide. It didn't tell me anything useful at all. So I don't know who named that a quick start guide, but it was completely useless. It just did not even point me in the right direction of what a quick start guide would be. And the only reason that I eventually found what they call their user guide was because it was mentioned on somebody else's tutorial on YouTube. That was how I finally found it, was through something else. And then it was through watching other people's tutorials that I eventually found somebody having their guess, because they weren't sure either, right? They had their guess about what that ASIO driver is all about and whether or not it's necessary and so on and so forth. So really the documentation on all this stuff is just absolute garbage. I have nothing positive to say about it. And it's, I don't mean that in like, I'm not trying to be rude to them or anything. It's just that that's shit documentation, and that is a shit documentation practice. And it really is an underwhelming effort. But it's beaten by Microsoft because of what Microsoft did. Now, I think I mentioned at the start of this video that Microsoft have really butchered their own product, and this is where they're making things so difficult for you. So I'm just going to bring in, at this point, Control Panel and the sound. So this is the thing that was inherited from Windows 7, which of course inherited from Windows XP and all the other ones, and Windows 98, and well, I can't remember when it first came around. I mean, I was out there with the old Apple IIe back in I can't remember, it might have been the late 70s or early 80s, but when we were kids, like sort of, we had an Apple IIe, somebody else had an Apple III, somebody else had a ZX81, families were kind of starting to get involved with personal computers, and, they were fairly cheap things because they couldn't do much. Certainly way cheaper than a lot of the computers today, but yeah, like really very low power. I mean, I kind of remember when the Apple II, it didn't even have a hard drive, right? You had RAM and you had ROM in the form of floppy disks, but you didn't actually have a hard drive. So if you ran out of space in the RAM and on the floppy disk, there wasn't sort of anywhere else to store anything else you'd been doing, and you'd just lose it. There was literally just nowhere else for it to go. And unless you were using a process where, it's like you had some kind of a warning and knew that you had to finish off one thing, get that saved to disk, and then enter a new disk, you were just screwed. You just lost everything else you'd done. And so we kind of mucked around with that a lot as kids. But when it kind of came through to the first PCs with Windows 3.1, that was like, the first time when you kind of, went in the mainstream of computers from just command line stuff and kind of imitated graphics and very, very low level graphics to actually a graphic user interface. That was the first time most of us ever saw it. I don't know if there were other sort of experimental systems or other competing commercial systems before that, but Windows 3.1 would have been the first that most of us saw. I can't remember if there was earlier versions of something equivalent to 3.1. I know that it did contain their version of the whole DOS thing, but anyway, whatever it was, that was what you kind of saw there with Windows 3.1. And then you kind of go into Windows 95 and 98 and then, XP and Millennium Edition and 7, blah, 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 blah. Now, the point I just raised all that is that prior to when maybe some of you were born, with Windows 95, I saw design flaws and bugs which got carried on from 95 through 98, through XP, through Millennium Edition 7, Vista 8.1, blah, 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 and still exist today with Windows 10 and now their new Windows 11. So there are some things that are that old which are definitively design flaws and bugs, and they didn't fix them. And I suspect the reason they didn't fix them is because unless they get a big corporate client who is aware of the fact that it is a design flaw or bug, and has a commercial reason for thinking of it as something that needs to be fixed, they're not going to go to Microsoft and say, hey, spend money and fix this thing. We're one of your biggest clients, do it. And that's the only person Microsoft's going to listen to. Because as far as they're concerned, every single other bit of money their company makes goes to shareholders and executives, right? They're like all other corporations. They have a very, very short-sighted view of things. And unfortunately, along with various other problems, this has meant that not only have they inherited through one operating system to the next, like a whole bunch of flaws and bugs and stuff, but they've actually been getting worse, right? And so there are bugs that aren't quite as old and design flaws that aren't quite as old, but they are entrenching them in place. And as the market reacts to this, because you have different operating systems, particularly those based upon Linux and, particularly, I guess, in the way that the Mac operating system caters to a different type of client. So the people at Microsoft have clearly decided that they want to make Windows more like Mac OS. Now, the problem with that is that that's not the reason we buy Windows. Right? We don't buy Windows because we want it to be like Mac OS. In fact, we specifically don't want it to be like Mac OS. The whole purpose for buying a Windows computer is because it's like a bridge between the extreme ends of Linux and Mac, right? So Mac is the whole thing where most of the things are nailed down and you really kind of can't get under the bonnet terribly much. You can't do as much tweaking and configuration shit as you can in Windows. You certainly can't do as much as you can in Linux. But what Windows offers you that Linux doesn't offer you is a hell of a lot more user-friendliness and a hell of a lot more of that under-the-hood stuff in a graphical user interface, right? Because in Linux, like some of the stuff you can get through a graphic user interface, some of it you can't. You've got to go in the command line. Now, you can do the command line in Windows as well and PowerShell and so forth. But what the people at Microsoft don't seem to understand is they have to be that bridge or they will kill their company in terms of Windows, because it's like nobody's going to be interested in Windows if it just becomes Mac OS. But that's what Windows 11 is doing. Now, the design flaw in particular that I'm referring to here involves this particular system of basically the legacy thing here. So when you go into control panel, and I usually, you might not be used to this view, you might be sort of coming in and seeing it by category like this, but I just hate that view. I just always go to large icons. And I come down here to the sound here, and in the sound, you've got playback and recording tabs, and on the recording tab is what we want, where my podcaster microphone, right, now you won't see this next window because I have to set up another capture window to grab it, and I'm not going to bother doing that because for some reason it doesn't want to grab this other extra monitor where I've got all this stuff set. But anyway, so if I click the properties button, you'll then get a window with a general tab, and you click from there quickly across to the levels tab. Just make sure the microphone level is up full, and then come back to the listen tab. Now, so this is the thing, for any microphone, if an application that you've run is using the microphone, then it will do this automatically for you. It's going to listen to the microphone. So it tells the microphone, hey, with respect to me, set yourself to listen. And then in my settings somewhere, I will then dictate what I hear through you, where that's going to go. But what you're getting here, when you go to the microphone that you want, so this is my USB microphone coming into the laptop, I click on the properties, and on that listen tab, I say, listen to this device. Doesn't matter if there's an application open, specifically listening to it, just listen to it all the time. That's what I'm doing. I'm clicking that checkbox that says listen to this device, and then right underneath that where it says playback through this device, I'm setting it to speakers, RODECaster Duo main multitrack. So what that basically means is that the microphone is, from the perspective of Windows, always on, always being listened to, even if no app is specifically listening to it, and it's sending its output to the main multitrack to the RODECaster, right? So that's what it's doing there, and you have that kind of granular control over it in this window. So that's why this is better than settings, right? Control panel, vastly better, because you know exactly what's going on. It's definitely doing that. That's its default state. Now, it happens to also be the default device. That's another matter. But its default state, when no application is specifically telling it otherwise, then what it will do is listen and point itself down the main channel 1 to the RODECaster, right? Now, if I had an application open which was also listening to this device, it could redirect what it's listening to a different output. That's fine. It can still do that. It can override the setting for itself only, right? So that's fine. We get that. Anyways, so that's what that is. Now, herein lies the problem. So if I now get rid of those two and the sound, right? So actually, I'll bring up Road Central again, but actually, no, sorry, I'll just put down Road Central. I'll bring us back to this page. And now what I want to do is bring up the settings. So now I'm just going to show you this and just quickly, I'll just check. Yeah, okay, yeah. So we've got this on full screen here. So this is now this new Windows 10 settings. And herein lies the problem, because it's effectively doing, for all the things in Control Panel, it's doing the same thing again in a different way. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if the two systems could not disagree, right? But the fact is, that's not what happens. Microsoft have designed and coded this so poorly that the two systems, the legacy control panel and the new settings thing, can disagree. And there are additional problems here. Okay, but what I found in here is that no matter how I change these settings, it doesn't behave as you would suspect that it should. There's also, like, there's no context-specific menus, there is no hover over help, there is no nothing, there's no search box here to get up to find something else in the settings, and I can't open another settings tab here, so I can't keep this over and switch between tabs to get different areas of settings, and I can't open a second copy of settings to get to other things. I can only do it by getting out of here and going somewhere else. Now, if I do go out of here, and I presume you're still seeing that, I'll just, yep, so if I come out here, right, okay, I'm at that thing. Now, finally, I get this thing over here, like, which is a little search box, right? And so I'm just going to go back to where I was. And this is the thing as well. Like, it's hard to actually, this is what you're looking for, right, to get to that other page, the sound mixer options. But if you actually went back to the home, where is it? It's like, where is it? Well, okay, well, let's just say that, well, system says it has sound in there. I'll go there. Okay, it's not here. Oh, okay, yeah, so it's there. No, it's not here. And you can look around and it's not intuitive to find that place. You have to, and even if it was, clearly it's going to be multiple clicks to get through there. I mean, if you've never heard the term double handling before, well, that's triple, quadruple handling just to get through to a particular place by following a trail. You have to know the name to look for to actually find it. And how would you find it if you'd never found it before? How would you find it if you never knew that you had to find it or what you were looking for? You just would never get here, or you might just get here by luck. So it's kind of a bit of a stupid system from that perspective, but also what is actually set here can contradict what is set in the old legacy control panel sound. And just to demonstrate that, let's just have a look here. Here is the desktop microphone Rode Podcaster V2. It is set to default for its output and input. Surely, given the fact that in control panel, it is still being told that its output is this one, speakers, RODECaster Duo main multitrack. Why does it say default there? Surely when I changed it in control panel, it should have automatically changed here as well. Why? Because both systems are talking to the same underlying hardware and hardware drivers and system settings. Therefore, it should be impossible for them to contradict each other. They should always have the exact same setting. And this is not just confusing, but it's also, look at that, it says output and input. Now, its default is its input is currently set to default. Now, what does that mean? I mean, it's a microphone. It is an input. Well, okay. Well, what's the default input? Well, the default input is the desktop Rode Podcaster V2. Okay. Well, that is itself, so that's fine. But what if I change the default to Duo main multitrack? And I'll just double check here that it's not going to change the recording when I do this. So I'll click on that. Okay. My voice is still coming through, so that's fine. So it didn't affect that. But here's the thing. So if the default input is now the main multitrack, what happened down here for the Rode Podcaster V2? It's still looking at the default. Well, hang on, but surely its input should always be itself. It's a microphone. Surely its default, no matter what I do, should be listening to itself. Now, that would seem to make logical sense, but they haven't explained it here anyway, and the only way you're going to do it is go out and get some of their useless bloody help or give them free feedback. So they're eventually, this is what this link in the top here means. This means we want to save money on salaries. We're not going to hire intelligent, well-educated people. We're just going to get you to tell us what's wrong with our product for free and get you to help us fix it so that we can reduce our costs and more money can go to rich people. So screw them. If you ever give the feedback, tell them there's something wrong and don't tell them exactly what it is or exactly how to find it, but just tell them that there's something wrong in this area. I'm not telling you what it is. You have to go find it your bloody selves and fix it your bloody selves. And I'm not going to submit my details of who I am. Screw you. You can't contact me. I'm just telling you there's something there. And if you can't be bothered, then your company will go under. You know, I think we need to start treating them like that because this is ridiculous. This would never have happened in decades past for a system this garbage, because this doesn't qualify as a beta version. It breaks and thoroughly breaks design rules that should never be broken, which constitute it being a design flaw. And so, yeah, Microsoft have made enormous mistakes there. Now, the thing is that when we go back up to, if I re-add back in the sound thing up here, I won't bother putting that across the screen, and you can see it here in the corner. But the point is that there is no uncertainty. When I go into the Podcaster 2 microphone, the recording thing, and I click on the properties, it tells me definitively, one, that I am listening to the device because I click that little checkbox that says listen to this device, and two, where it's being played back. There is no uncertainty, right? And that's what you need. You need to have unambiguous settings, unambiguous feedback, unambiguous instructions, unambiguous documentation, and it just, to me, looks like everybody has failed. So if you are having problems with all this stuff, that really, from my perspective, is why they've just done a really appallingly bad job of all this stuff. And what you're going to have to do is to make sacrifices, because unless you have enough money to buy all of the equipment you need to get into a better setup with enough room and all your furniture and everything just dedicated to the job, you know, when it comes to recording, you know, fine. Now, maybe you've come from a rich family, you can afford that stuff. Hey, good for you. But for the rest of us, it's like it really kind of sucks. And they've just done such a bad job. So all I can say there is that this whole thing with the settings is a design flaw. It should never have been done that way. And don't use it. Just go to Control Panel, use Control Panel Sound to specifically grab any device that you want to have come down a particular channel to your Rode, and decide whether you need to click that listen to this device button or not. Now, be careful as well. When you click that listen to this device and then click apply, this is really important here, guys. Make sure that whatever you are listening to and whatever you're sending it to, anything that is listening to that thing is a potential place where you are about to hear some enormous feedback if you get it wrong. So bring all your volume levels down, right? Mute anything that's not involved, and just test it with everything sort of down, and then just gradually bring it up and be really, really ready to go back, deselect that checkbox and quickly click apply to stop it. Because if you kind of peak something out with loads and loads of feedback, this is where you might have to, I don't know whether it was this video, this take, or a previous take. If I didn't mention it, I'll mention it now, that sometimes you might hit on a thing where all of a sudden the RODECaster and the computer aren't talking to each other in terms of some device, and it was working fine minutes ago. And what I found was that it will work again. It seems like there might be like an inbuilt kind of safety valve, if you will, that if you get like an audio channel peeking out into the red because it's got just way too much feedback or way too much volume, it seems like these systems are at least smart enough that they defend the physical hardware that could otherwise be damaged by that peeking out, by kind of switching it off and disconnecting it. That's what I think is going on. But a reboot will reset it, and it seems to work anyway. Is it like if it does happen, then you can reboot, but it's just better to avoid it. And this is one of those situations where I know you can get it, is when, you know, you are saying listen to this device and the output is to some channel where you just kind of weren't looking at it right, and because you clicked apply, bang, all of a sudden you're going to get like all this feedback. So before you do it, bring all your volume levels that are associated down, mute anything else that is not involved, and if you're not sure what's involved or not, then bring everything down, mute everything but the first kind of point that you want to test, and just test that one, bring its volume level up, find the next thing that might be involved, unmute that with the volume still way down, and just gradually bring it up. And in all cases, just be ready to deselect that box and click apply again to stop listening to the device, and what you'll know is that that's just a combination where it's just not going to work. You know, if you're getting that feedback, yeah, don't even try again. It's not going to happen. And if you get it for too long and suddenly your computer or the Rode or whatever can't see that device anymore, then just reboot. You should be okay. Or at least, look, it has worked that way for me. But at least, hopefully, with that advice, you might be able to avoid that situation entirely, which would be good. Anyways, I don't know if there's anything else that I can say and that I haven't already said. And I've probably repeated myself on a few things here. And also, this recording has now gone on for over an hour, and I've still got another bit to tack on the front of it. So perhaps I'll just leave it there. And if you have any questions of anything that I didn't answer or that you weren't clear about, then just perhaps write it in the comments or whatever. And if I've got time and I see that, I'll do my best to answer it if I can. But yeah, I'll just finish off with just kind of, summarizing again. So the things that you want to note here is control panel sound, not settings. Input and output, both channels for each USB, for each channel on each USB, where one USB has one channel, secondary, the other USB has two channels, channel 1 main and channel 1 chat. Each of these channels has both input and output. From the perspective of the computer, when you look in your settings, you're going to see microphones for these channels. The microphone is listening to that device. So whatever's coming from the Rode back to your laptop, you'll hear it on the microphone, right? Which means it's after the faders, after the effects. The speakers is what's going to the Rode on that channel, right? So make sure that you've got that unambiguous understanding of what's what in terms of input and output. Remember that when you're listening to or reading other people's tutorials and guides and stuff, they might use these words input and output and it might not always be clear which perspective, like, are they talking about it from the perspective of the Rode, from the perspective of the laptop, or from the perspective of one channel and its relationship to another channel? Like, are you talking about this thing as an input to that or an output from that? Or, so there's all these areas where we can get ambiguity in language. And unfortunately, that's what I found, is that most people haven't gone into the detail to make that clear. So I hope I've helped you clear that up. But again, feel free to write to me. You can, of course, mute the channels with the buttons to be able to have things going through the same channel for recording and for conversations over headphones and stuff with callers in such a way that you can switch mics for different purposes without getting reverb or feedback, especially where, like myself, you might not have an easy setup for, getting up from one seat to go back to a laptop to change something there and then going back to the other seat where you need to be. And if you're trying to do everything in one take without all that, then, the best way is to set it up so that you just kind of switch things that are being muted on the Rode, and then sacrificing certain things to ensure, again, the lack of reverb, lack of echo, lack of feedback, lack of any of those problems by recording them on the output, the speaker, heading to the Rode before it gets to the Rode, which means you won't be able to affect it with the faders on the Rode. You'll have to record it and affect the levels in either the application that it's coming from or in OBS, or a combination of both, to get the levels just right. And if you're not sort of wanting to get up and move seats and stuff in between and change and tweak settings and stuff while you're trying to record in one take, then you just kind of got to get it at the best level that you can, right? And it seems to be a limitation of hardware and software at present. It's possible that an update to the drivers and the firmware for the RODECaster might at some stage in the future improve this. I think I said this on a previous recording as well, that I would hope that Rode and OBS can start talking to each other a lot more, because they're both very popular pieces of software, and you would think that it would be in Rode's interests and in OBS's interests for them to help make all this stuff like a lot clearer and a lot easier and a lot less ambiguous for new users, particularly so that people can come in and buy all this stuff and to work with their products and so forth. Anyways, so what else we got here? So the only other thing then is in Rode Central. I'll just quickly bring that one up. So over here, listening on your headphones, you may have other headphones, other speakers. I've only got those ones, but just, telling it what you want to listen to, muting things to avoid echo back in here. Because, it's hard to speak if you're hearing an echo, right? So hence the reason why I use the mutes is just to have one setting which has got everything, but I can switch between mutes to avoid reverb and avoid echo without having to come and change anything. That one again, it's carrying it down. It's not carrying back up. I don't know for sure why, but it seems to be a hardware limitation of that channel. The chat channel can do it, so it's got that USB mic, but again, muting so that it's only going to deliver one mic at a time. So whether I'm talking on my headphones, on the XLR mic, alone, or on a call, there's that. or I can be sitting without the headphones talking on the USB mic, and so otherwise that'll be muted or that one will be muted, and then music and sound effects there, which I could add in here. I could add for other purposes there as well, or I could get some software just to listen to that or talk to that, whatever, you know. So you've got these various options. These are very different settings from most of the tutorials that I watched where they're talking about main mix and mix minus, but it seems to me that that may very well have been a way that this whole thing was designed to be used for certain cases that a lot of people might have, but as you can see for mine, it just didn't work, and I couldn't get it to work. There was nothing about it that would work in a way that was satisfactory. There was always reverb, echo, feedback, problems, and things just not working, but this way works. And so because it took like a long time to figure out, I hope that this will help you to get yours set up faster, if that has helped you bypass the same problems. And I'll just take that down and switch back there. And just reiterate, yeah, so recording my voice here, recording music sound effects, recording my guest's voice on the chat thing if I have a call, and don't use Windows 10, 11 settings. Yeah, look, I'm probably repeating myself, so how about we end it there? Thank you very much all. I hope that helped. Good night.